Morning, friends. My name's Rob, and I am an addict. And I'm grateful to be here, and I'm from the Sudbury area. So as one of your host cities, we welcome you all here. We thank you for being here today. And we hope that you find the convention valuable, full of love, and relationship building. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to speak today on the subject of relationships. My gratitude speaks when I care and when I share with others the NA way. And whenever I have an opportunity to do this, I ask myself, why are you doing this, Rob? What's your purpose in this? And hopefully you will see that while this is my story, it is not about me. It's about us. It's about we. We admitted. We are here for each other. And that's the heart of relationships for me. Some people have commented on my shirt, by the way. I want you to know it's Amazonian. I got it on Amazon. I wasn't always the life of the party. Even at a young age, I was I was a large kid, and I have some awkwardness, some social awkwardness, and I tend to be big and loud to compensate. And as you guys might know, kids are cruel. If you're a mark, man, you are a target. And so I was. And so relationships were always difficult for me. I always felt on the outside. I always felt like I didn't belong. I always felt less than. Everyone else seemed way cooler than me. And, that plagued me from my earliest days, I recall. And, and so it wasn't long before I discovered that there is a way to ease that discomfort, a way to slide into a conversation, a way to be part of, and that was with using. It was drugs. And I started early. I started at the age 10, and I realized there's an alternate reality to the life I was living. And that was also the beginning of isolation. I isolated myself. I would use alone. Interestingly enough, the beginning of my using was also filled with some of the characteristics that carried on through my life, and some of the character defects like, dishonesty, stealing. My first using was something I stole from my brother. So those characteristics of negative impact as it relates to others was a theme in my life as well. I suppose the first relationships that were impacted by my using was with friends, trying to fit into that social circle. And at first it was good because I became a part of. There were weekend parties, the ones that I was invited to, because sometimes I wasn't, because I was addicted to more of everything, more of yours especially. And so that made me a bit of a pariah, an outsider. Also, I was using in ways that most weren't. First of all, I started to drink my drug, as many of us did, and I would find that you knew how much Rob drank by the volume in the room. I would just get louder as the night went on, and that didn't always work to my favor. But nonetheless, I found another group of people that were loud and had wild times, and it was fun. It was enjoyable. But even then, there was a sense of not quite belonging, because I was always the last man standing. I was always, the last one using. I was always the last one alone. That loneliness was insipid. It was insidious. It was there, but I didn't know what it was. It just felt like a not rightness, if you know what I mean, like a disjointedness from not only you guys and the world around me, but from myself. I had no idea who I was, because I was trying to make everybody around me happy. I needed to be liked and loved by all. So I would be anything anybody wanted me to be. Anything. I would assimilate. I was the great assimilator. I would fit into any situation. And that carried through my life as well for as long as I can remember. It seeped into all aspects and all areas of the relationships that I engaged in. And so as I grew, and I lived with this group of friends, and we had fun, The interesting thing is they all went on, even through the partying and the mayhem and the madcap antics, they went on to live normal lives. They had successful careers. They had relationships that worked. They raised families that worked. They just looked at life differently. I grew. I had a career. I had a family. But again, it always seemed to be somewhat dysfunctional. I am blessed in a way, blessed and cursed. I have a mental disorder, and that sometimes leads me to be bombastic and charming and wild and a pretty good communicator at times. And so, that fit into it, my ideas of having people love me. But at the same time, I was very hard to understand, and that, that charm would turn into arrogance or into conceit, into ego, and so relationships were impacted in that way too. I always had a hard time having personal relationships with women. Part of my awkwardness, part of my social awkwardness, great parts, my sense of low self-esteem, body dysmorphia, things that I was just, I didn't love myself enough to be loved by others. I'd watch those who were successful, those leaders in high school, the ones that they were just the cool dudes, and they. And why is it the girls always like the bad guys? What's up with that? I tried to be a bad guy, it didn't fit. I just seemed like annoying, It didn't matter. I couldn't wear that persona very well, even though I did things that weren't right. I just wasn't cool enough to be a bad boy. I was just fucking annoying, a pest, and that kind of set me on the outside too. So high school was that, and yet in there I found a few good people that I hung out with, but they were also people like me who enjoyed using, and we'd get together and we'd, interestingly enough, isolate in groups. So isolation continued to be a part of my relationships too. I mean, there were those that I used with, and only those people, and all we did was use. And eventually, some of them stopped and moved on, but some of them died. Some of them disappeared, and I have no idea where they are today. But the majority of them moved on to normal lives. I didn't. I continued to use. In fact, I look back on it, and I used for 39 years, and the only time I wasn't using was when I couldn't get. I didn't have ways and means. That was the only time I would not use. I was a daily addict. I used from the time I woke up till the time I went to bed. In fact, I used to go to bed a lot of times. I also used to stay up a lot of times. For days, and I think some of you might connect to that psychosis that comes from after day 5, 6, and 7. I remember telling my daughter, she was 13 at the time, and I was going through a period of psychosis, and I told her, "Baby, I don't know what's real anymore, and I don't trust anybody to tell me." And that's where this disease takes me. It took me to that land of uncertainty of what's real. But I believed it. One danger in my career, and I'm in the career of industrial sales, and it's pretty high level selling that I do, and it's boardroom stuff, and it's the danger with that is that you can believe your own marketing. There's no greater salesperson than a true believer. If you're not sure, ask a preacher. So that ego feeding fed my addiction as well. I ended up in, first of all, the first true relationship that I had that was a success was with my wife. I'm happy to say that we've been together for 42 years. And in that 42 years, I was only asked once to leave the home, but it was during a period of psychosis. I've never been violent, but I've been extremely bizarre. And lost in myself. Interesting, self is always part of this. I had the best relationship with myself. It was a love-hate relationship, but it was there all the time. It was always about me. Always. In fact, I just connected with one of my kids, my oldest, who had moved out to New Brunswick, and I happened to be in Montreal, so her and her partner came west, I went east, and we met in the middle. And we were talking about things of the past. And we were talking about, events that we participated in and things, and I said, you know what, I don't remember any of that. I don't remember that, I don't remember that. I remember it took place, but I don't remember what you're talking about. All I remember is how those events related to me. If I was not the center of it, it doesn't exist in my conscience anymore. Yeah. I was that selfish, that self-centered, that self-concerned, that honestly I don't have a lot of memories of events with my kids. I have 5 kids. And we had great outings and we did wonderful things together. And I had my first 3 were dancers, and we went on dancing conventions, and we had all kinds of great times, but they only were about me. Imagine that you've got 2 of your daughters up there, and they've been working hard and they're performing, and I'm wondering what people think of me having raised those kids. I really did. That goes to the heart of my disease, the heart of why my relationships don't work, is because they're so one-sided. In fact, the woman that I married and live my life with today was there as an extension of me. She became a fantastic enabler in my addiction. She became incredibly codependent. She felt she had to care for me, but she also had to be, seeking love and attention because it was so about me. Classic codependency. In fact, when I was jonesing, when I was not able to pick up, I would drive the house insane. I'd be restless, irritable, angry. In fact, to the point where my wife would go and make connections to pick up for me because my behavior was intolerable. I would tell her that I have to use because the alternative is simply unacceptable. I could not live without using. I could not exist. It was too painful. And I thought that was all related to self-medication for a mental illness, trying to fit in, trying to get this high-profile machine working right. I needed that. I needed that. And when I didn't have it, that discontent, I realized it wasn't a lack of medication, it was jonesing. I was just jonesing. I was just needing. Psychologically, physically, I was needing. And as my addiction grew, and I had ways and means more readily available, then I fed that need all the time and to greater extremes. My relationship with my children, I have to admit that we raised 5 wonderful children. My kids are all advocates, peacekeepers, fighters for the underdog. And I have to give most of the credit for that to my wife. My wife was made to have children. She's a nurturer. She's physically made to have kids. Most of our kids were like 5.5 to 6 hours old, and we're at grandma's having pie. After that 1 hour of monitoring, she was walking down 4 flights of stairs to have a smoke. True story. And yet, when I recovered, when I got into, when I became clean, and by the way, my clean date is May 22nd, 2014, coming up to an anniversary. My kids didn't know anything other than the life they lived with an addict. It was their normal. But I was for the most part in their world the cool dad. I finally became a cool kid. I finally became that. Except sometimes to extremes. I would find myself being the incredible flying man, self-proclaimed. And my kids, they to some extent they gloried in the light of that bombastic, charming nature. We brought people to us. We were the party house. We were the cool place. All their kids hung out with us because I was that over the top. I was that performer. And so that was attractive to them. But then there was also where's Dad? And I traveled for a living. I did a lot of travel. So when I was home, not only did I deprive them of self when I was on the road, but when I was home, I was totally immersed in using and work. I was fully committed to this work that I did and to advancing myself and to being a rock star. That was my whole objective. And they were sort of, oh yeah, tag-alongs, you know. But there'd be times when they wanted to talk to me and I'd shut them out. You know, I'm busy. Meanwhile, I'd be in the bathroom for hours. And they're wondering, you know. But that was their normal. They didn't know anything else. But then, when I came into recovery, in fact, I didn't have a problem, don't you know. I had no problem at all. Everybody else thought I had a problem. They had the problem. They didn't understand me. If they would understand me, if they lived the way I did, they'd be using too. In fact, I used to have what I called Bacardi Fridays. I had a group of people that worked for me, about 10 or 12, and we were all on the road, but on Fridays we all ended up back in the office to do catch-up work and planning and the rest of it. And so it was a lot of reconnecting. But Friday at 2 o'clock, the bottle of Bacardi came out on my desk and everybody had to sit and drink with me. You know, that's how I formed relationships, was I held court. You know, I dragged people into my world, whether they wanted to be there or not. And I was their boss. You know, and I was a larger than life kind of boss. And so I created relationships that way too. Don't tell me you can't buy me love. You can buy love for a minute. Till the money runs out. Till things go too far. But my kids, I had an intervention at work. And don't you know? In fact, my immediate reports, I had about 7 that reported directly to me, and they went to our managing director and they said, I can't work with Rob. All of them went together to say, we can't work with Rob. He's too much. You know, and I was too much. I was the great mentor who rewrote their letters. I did all their planning because I had to control everything, because it wasn't going to work unless I did it. So they had an intervention at work, and they, just like on TV, there was about a dozen of them in the room. My direct reports, my managing director, head of HR, head of finance, even some guys off the production floor were there. And they said, it was unreal. Rob, we love you, but we think we're using you. Verbatim. Like they'd watched it. You know, they had watched intervention, and I don't even think it was on at the time. Maybe. Anyway. So they all had their piece of paper on how I'm impacting their lives. And I listened to them, and they wore me down, and I said, okay, I'm gonna go and tackle this problem. All right, there's something not right here. Because I just wanted them to shut the fuck up. Because I wanted to get the fuck out of there and use. I just wanted to go use. You know, and that was, having to endure that 2.5 hours, So finally I said, yeah, you're right. But the mistake they made was they didn't have the van outside to whisk me off to the spa rehab. That they didn't. They let me go out to my pickup, open the windows, crank Amy Winehouse rehab, and burn out of the parking lot. A fact. The absolute arrogance, eh? So there's my relationship with my coworkers, and that actually led them to an ultimatum saying either you go get help or you just go. That ended up sending me to treatment, and I'll tell you something. Treatment did a couple of things for me. It gave me 35 days clean, and introduction to a 12-step program, and a way of life that has saved my life and the relationships and lives around me. My kids, when I told them that I was going off to treatment, and of course I wasn't going for me, I was going to get my piece of paper so I could save that job, so I could say, okay, I did it, and I was going to be a closet drunk, a closet user, I was going to hide in the back room, no one would know. I used to use with my coworkers, and I wouldn't do that anymore. I had a plan. I told my wife that before I went to treatment. So I had to tell the kids I was going off for 5 weeks, and so we got together where else at the Keg, where I held court, slamming my double Bacardis, on my daughter's 19th birthday, and I made it about me. And when I told them that I was going to treatment, they cried. They cried. Not because they were going to miss me, but because they had hope that they might get a life back. And I didn't even see it. I didn't understand. I thought they were just going to miss me. It didn't compute. Why are they so impacted by me going to treatment? So I went to treatment and I started new relationships there. I started relationships with folks like us. You know, treatment isn't necessarily part of the NA program, but I'll tell you what it is. It's a part of forging and building bonds. That's very much the same way as this. You know, and I needed to interrupt the cycle, so I make no apologies. And by the way, you know, even though I am up here speaking at an NA conference, I don't represent NA. I don't speak for NA. So keep an open mind. This is my life, my experience, right? I try and be consistent with the message, but this is still my life. So I came out of there and I became one of us. And then I started real relationships. For the first time in my life, I walked into a room and people hugged me because they loved me in the moment at that time, because they get it. You know, like survivors of a shipwreck. We cling together. Any survivor in any disaster, some leaders show up and they rally everyone together, and the most important message they give is it's okay. It's safe. We're going to be okay. I'm not all right, but it's all going to be okay. It's not all right, but we're all going to be okay. So, you folks welcomed me. And I found my tribe. I found people who actually get it. They got it. I found a way. I looked at my life and I looked at, I was made to do an exercise. Look at your life from the first time you used anything to the time you're writing this down, and ask yourself, what were you doing? How was it escalating? What were the consequences to you and to others? What were the repercussions? And after 24 or 21 pages of bullet point, I discovered I was powerless. I used at the wrong times all the time. I used in front of people that I shouldn't use in front of because I didn't have a choice. I had lost the power of choice. So I was powerless, and you guys got that. My life was unmanageable. It was clear I was sitting in an institution writing this, and I saw the unmanageability of my life. And then I met you guys, and you said you get it. And you showed me a way. You showed me a way to a power greater than myself that could restore me to sanity. That insane lifestyle I lived, that delusion of grandeur that was me, was replaced by a sense of you. It became about you. The problem I had was I was the great director, the controller, the great manipulator of all things, and believed my own marketing. So the antidote for that, the pendulum was way over here. And the antidote for that was step 3, and I had to move it all the way to the other side and make it not about me, but about a guide of my thinking. I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood God. Not your God, not anybody else's God, just God. God is just a 3-letter word for something greater than myself, that cares about me, that wants well for me, and will guide me if I allow. If I allow your words to come into my thinking, if I allow your teaching to become a part of me. You know, the things I've learned in Narcotics Anonymous are not things I do, not things that are done by me, but they are the things that are of me. Not what I do, but who I am. You know, and that, to think that someone for 39 years who was only about themselves could actually gain an open mind and a willingness to say, you have the answer. Because I saw it. It was witnessed. That is the power of relationships like we have. People who are together for no other reason, don't even belong together. On the street, we're just people going in different directions, passing each other, right? Going to our careers, going to our lives, going to our relationships. But here, we're one. God grant us the serenity. But to accept the things that we will change together. And then, I'm told the heart of NA beats when two addicts share their recovery. And sponsorship became a massive, important relationship in my life. I take sponsorship very seriously. I believe that these 12 steps are life-saving. I have had people die. We've all been to the funerals. We've all seen the crosses. I've had sponsees where I was the last person they talked to who have left us by suicide or by overdose. And some of those, there was one fellow in particular that I worked with, and he was so troubled emotionally, mentally, and his addiction owned his ass. But we made strides. We worked some steps together, and there were moments in that relationship where he found true peace and joy and serenity. And so when I lost him, I hurt. I had pain, deep pain. But I'll tell you something. I will trade that pain for 6 minutes of joy that this guy felt because we connected. Because he heard a message of hope in a life of darkness. I'll trade that pain for that moment. I can't fix anybody. I'm not responsible for anyone's recovery. I'm not responsible for anyone's relapse. I'm only responsible for myself and the message that I carry. But I have a heart for you guys. And it's a life-saving program. I have the Stay Alive solution. Imagine, I have the Stay Alive solution to a life that's death waiting. So I take it pretty seriously. It's the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous. It's the way to move from through a spiritual growth to a new way of life. Not just clean, not just alive, but content and happy and life-filling. Living a life that we've never had before. So if there's any newcomers here, first of all, I welcome you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us on this journey, but I can make this promise to you. We have never seen anyone relapse who has followed the NA way of life, the NA program. Never. So, sometimes I approach people. I have a thing. I have this little card that I made with relapse behaviors and recovery behaviors, and I say, take this out of your wallet. There's 12 on each side, by the way. Take this out of your wallet once in a while and check which side you're living on. Are you living in recovery? Or are you living in relapse? And my phone number's on there, and if they find themselves on the wrong side of the card, I said, use this number. No. And people say, you're always out there. And that's a good thing. But some say, hey, Rob, you come on pretty strong with your message. Well, I'll tell you something. When someone's standing on the precipice, when they're about to take the leap, I'm not going to say, oh, careful now, maybe we should talk about this. Like, fuck, get back here. I will grab them and I will pull them back. Because that's how serious this disease is. It's serious as a heart attack. So I take that pretty seriously. And if you think I'm over the top, then so be it. Maybe I'm not your guy. And that's okay too, because your guy's out there. I guarantee it. There is a sponsor for every single one of us here. And sometimes it's a series of sponsors, people who meet us where we are at the moment, that do what we need them to do for us. And there are some who walk with us for life. It doesn't matter. There are sponsors out there for you. Guaranteed. You will find someone who's willing to listen and care and share and guide. not lead. I believe sponsorship is two people walking together, sharing their experiences together. I have learned everything I know about recovery. I learned everything I know about Narcotics Anonymous. I know everything I know today. I've learned it from sponsorship. Either through my sponsoring others, but mostly from other sponsors that I sponsor. My sponsees give me an opportunity to relive my learning through teaching. They give me insight to things I didn't know. You know, at any stage of my life, I don't know what I don't know. I don't have everyone's experience. So they bring me that experience, and they challenge my thinking, and they give me answers, and I find solutions to my life in trying to support their lives and trying to guide them. Or just listening. My greatest gift in sponsorship is an ability to listen and play back. Here's what I heard you say. You know, I'm a soundboard. I just give it to me, I'll give it back to you. I help them reframe their thinking if possible. Through the message I get here. That's all I can do is carry the message. I don't carry the mess. I don't carry the addict. I carry the message. And why am I able to do that? Where do I find the strength, the courage, the know-how, the ability to do that? Through a God who does for me what I am not able to do. I have certain gifts and talents that God uses to allow me to be of use to others. You know, after, 50-ish years, 54 years, I found my purpose in life. And imagine to find the reason that you're here. Not just for consumption and death, not just to exist, not just to use, not just to take. My purpose in life, I believe, is God-given, and it is to be free of self and of use to God and to others. And the reason I believe that that's my purpose is because when I have the opportunity to do that, when I have an opportunity to do what I'm doing right now, when I have an opportunity to listen to someone and be a shoulder to cry on, or just be a compassionate heart to know that it's safe and you're loved. When I have that opportunity to touch a heart, I am filled with a joy that has way too few letters to express my feelings. It's like a God kiss. And that tells me that is my purpose, because I can't think of anything else I do that is so fulfilling. You know, and that message that I carry was planted in me. And I'll tell you, it was planted in early because I was made well. I truly believe that we are all well made. I believe that we come to this planet with gifts and talents and grace and mercy and love. Somewhere along the line we might turn left or right and we might detour, but if we allow that maker of us to come back, we will be back to how we were made. My whole life, my whole purpose, my whole desire is to be closer to the person I was made to be. And I tell you, these 12 steps are made to make me that person. I'm made to take a look at my life, myself. The fourth step is not about writing down all the shit I did, all the terrible things, the shitty stuff that happened to me. It's about finding the things within me that are objectionable to me and to others. That's the point. Because in step 5, I get to share that story with a sharing partner. And if they understand what I'm trying to achieve, which is to find the exact nature of those wrongs, the root cause, the who am I that did the things I did. Not the things I did, but the who I am. And I face that fearlessly because I can only fix what I see. So in sharing that, it's revealed, the character defects are revealed. Now I can be ready to deal with that. I can be entirely ready to have God remove those defects of character. And the ones that I'm not able to work on myself, being entirely ready to me means to do what you can, to try and address the issues. You want to get rid of a character defect, stop doing it. Stop doing it. Not so simple, which is why we have step 7, where we humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings, the ones we aren't able to tackle. I don't believe God's there as a pinch hitter to come in when we need him. I think God's there all the time to show us what to do. And then I have the courage and the willingness in step 8 to write down the people that I've harmed. All of them. It says all the people we have harmed. And become willing to make amends to them all. And it just requires willingness. And then in step 9, which is an ongoing process for me. Time, place, opportunity, me in the right spiritual place is when an amend takes place. And I can tell you, I've been here for a little while now, and there are still amends to be made. There's one major amend that I destroyed a person's life. Like, I destroyed their life. That I haven't been able to make yet. And it was not... Sometimes it's trepidation and fear, but it just hasn't been an opportunity. I don't think I've really sought out the opportunity as hard as I should, but that'll come. God will remove the fear when it's time for the fear to be gone, and when I have the faith to release it, right? So now I live in 10, 11, and 12 where I maintain my spiritual condition. I have been brought to a state of spiritual correctness, and when I'm in that moment, when I'm on my spiritual game, I can do everything that God intends for me to do. And in that, gratitude is about action to me. I could say thank you, but I have to be grateful. I have to show gratitude. I have to demonstrate it. It's much more. And not that I have to. In order to be grateful, I am in action. And here's the beauty of that. The beauty of gratitude, putting me in action, is that through the action, I get the blessing. By being there for someone else, by showing how grateful I am for this program, for this life-saving program, for being here today with you folks, and telling you that you can stay alive, you can live a life beyond your wildest dreams, and you can impact and the lives of those around you, again, is the blessing. Now, if you could feel the way I feel right now, joy doesn't have enough letters. So, I'm going to leave it a little early because we can all use a coffee. I know I can. But I'm not good at memory, so I'm memorizing stuff, but I want to leave this with a paragraph from Living Clean, because this is how I learned to live. I live clean today. And our literature is a guide for all things clean, all ways to live. And so it says, relationships are central to everything we do. There is no step or tradition that is not somehow about relationships. And all of our literature talks about relationships in some way or another. There is no other area in our recovery that causes more pain or more joy. It is where we see our growth and our recovery most clearly. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for being here for me.
On behalf of OrgNet 36, I would like to thank Rob for sharing his experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join us in a circle to close this meeting with a version of the Serenity Prayer.
You put it out to us. Now go fucking do it. I think our shirts have a similar vibe.